Call to order. Turn my mic on. Call to order the April 16th, 2015 business meeting. And tonight, Commissioner Ludlow and Smith, along with our county administrator, are attending emergency management training, will not be in attendance. And Nancy Newton, our deputy county administrator, would you please do the roll?
Certainly, I would be happy to do so. And also for the record, because John Ludlow is out of town today, Jim Bernard is our chair this evening. So in your comments, if you're referring to Commissioner Bernard, please refer to him as Chair Bernard in his capacity for this meeting. So Commissioner Savis.
Here.
Commissioner Schrader. Here. Chair Bernard.
Here.
Thank you.
Please join me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First up is our citizen communication, and Jose Hernandez and Mac Woods. After that is Les Poole. Jose, you're up first. Hope you're not expecting us to read that. You have 3 minutes.
He made a copy of this of the property tax exemption for disabled veterans. My concern as a qualified disabled veteran, but I don't meet the qualifications based on what's here. Now I'm going to be, it's 40% disabled veterans that starts this, and it started in 1955. My current home that I bought it in 98, and I don't qualify because there's a provision here that limits the income to 185% of the poverty level in the United States. And a single person, the income for a single person is $11,770. So 185% of that would be the maximum that one could have income coming in. I believe, I don't know, this is a 2015 revision, and I believe that it should be rewritten to justify all of that. For example, we talk about the Civil War. That's 165 years ago. So do we have veterans that are that old? No. And we should not then be listing them here, although that was a provision back in 1955. Likewise, they mentioned the Spanish American Civil War. We should not be including them. And the limitations on this provision, after you read it, it only applies to 3 years back from the day in which you apply. So I think, although this is a state issue, but I think that we here in Clackamas County, Mr. Bernard, you deal with veterans, that this should be corrected so that when people hear that they're qualified or that they could be qualified, that they understand it from the very, very beginning, rather than having to wait until they apply and then they're denied because they earn more money than they're eligible for. And those are the concerns that I have. Because
Well, we might take that to the Veterans Committee and see if they could work on development of a bill to change that. So,
Is that a,
But that's federal, isn't it?
is it federal or state? That's
That's from the DAV, right? Or
Excuse me?
Department of Is that from the Department of Veterans Affairs?
I think it's the state of Oregon.
it applies to all disabled veterans, 40% disabled and more.
What I meant, is it federal or is that just for the Oregon?
state law.
It's in Oregon.
Okay, so it needs to be fixed. A legislative fix needs to happen at the state level then.
Yeah, it's from
Okay.
the Oregon Department of Revenue is the one that is involved with this.
Okay. Okay, so,
Well, Martha and I both serve on the Veterans Committee. We'll be happy to bring that to the Veterans Committee, see if they can get a bill maybe next session. It's too late now. Thank you.
we could get it changed.
Mr. Woods?
Clackamas County Commissioners, I am Mac Woods. I live out here in the county, and I am a veteran also. This statute, Clackamas County is one of 36 counties in the state. There's a lot of veterans in Clackamas, Washington, and Multnomah County, which is the 3 counties where taxes are higher than any of the others. A service-connected veteran, there's a lot of them, a lot worse off than I am. Like this one sitting right here, he can do things that I can't do with his right arm. Show him, Jose. He's certainly qualified as a service-connected veteran. This started in 1955 when houses were selling in 1955, the size of his house, between $5,000 and $7,000, and they had an automatic exemption up to $10,000 in 1955. So in the past 55 years, property taxes has gone up, and this hasn't changed a bit in equivalent to have a tax exemption, which above all, a man like him, veteran, we were stationed together in Long Beach in the early 60s, aside from that. So we need to get in touch statewide and talk to the Senate and congressmen to get it back to, if they're going to represent the veterans, and other than voting time, when they always want to say what they're doing for the veterans and forget about the veterans except during elections or re-election. So that's what we need to do. Common sense just ain't too common anymore with a lot of politicians. I'm not one of them. I don't know if I have any common sense, but that's just how it seems to me. But they always want to talk about what they're doing for the veterans when they're running for election. We would like to see them put their mouth where it counts and do something for the veterans. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Mr. Poole?
This is the-
Seeing that gentleman's injuries puts life in perspective. I want to thank him again. I talked to him once, and in his condition, that man's been politically active, and that's the kind of people that inspire me, and I really mean that. I've been getting inquiries about what's going on at Park Avenue and the transit center and the changes in Milwaukee. Recently, I received something from an individual, and I was shocked. And what I was shocked to see after all the controversy and after all the divide that went on for years, A gentleman produced a document that says here, January of 2013, there was a property negotiation and compensation to Commissioner Bernard of $273,000. I am not here to question whether or not you were affected by light rail or any amount you received. What the citizens and I have questioned all along is the participation of an elected official in this process. And apparently, and I can only use the word apparently, the participation of that official probably after they knew their property was affected. $273,000 was the amount on the document. Now, it's not a final check, it's not a final amount, but anyone that was troubled about what was going on in Milwaukee around the transit station area, around the area where redevelopment is going to occur, TriMet and Metro don't authorize the project unless that's already on the books. And I'm not as strong as I used to be, but I could probably get from the station to your property in less than 30 seconds, sir. I'm disappointed, and I wish I wasn't here today sharing this with you. I will leave copies at the front desk. Thank you.
Okay, that's the end of the public citizen testimony. We'll move on to a public hearing. Second reading of ordinance number 04-2015, amending Clackamas County Code to add Chapter 8.09, establishing time, place, and manner regulations for medical marijuana dispensaries and declaring an emergency. Dan Chandler's here today, and he will give us some information. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, Chair Bernard. Since this is second reading, and you've heard most of this before, my presentation will be quite brief. This is second reading of ordinance 04-2015, establishing time, place, and manner regulations for medical marijuana dispensaries. This ordinance will supersede the moratorium put in place by the Commission in April of last year and replace it with a set of time, place, and manner regulations as required by state law. I want to talk briefly about a couple of considerations that have gone into this process. On the one side, we've dealt with access to medical marijuana card holders. We've dealt with the notion that too many restrictions would drive users to the black market. On the other hand, we've had to address concerns about proliferation, normalization, and access by youth. There are also law enforcement, neighborhood concerns, and public safety concerns on the other side. I think it's also important to note that our belief is that most, if not all, medical marijuana dispensaries will likely become recreational marijuana vendors eventually under the provisions of Measure 91. So this really, we should characterize this as an interim step and a sort of go slow approach. It's far easier to loosen regulations later than it is to tighten them later once people have already established businesses. To summarize what the regulations are, chiefly they are setbacks between dispensaries, 2,500 feet, 2,000 feet from schools, 1,500 feet from light rail stops, and a host of other facilities. There is a map on the wall there under the other TV screen. I'll put it up here on this screen. And note, this is informational only. We're not adopting this map. This map is not part of the regulations. It's simply informational. There may be things that have been missed. There may be dispensaries that have closed or submitted applications subsequent to this. But this is essentially the effect of the setbacks as set forth today. It includes the facilities that have been effectively grandfathered under the ordinance passed by the board in January. That would be 3 facilities, 2 on the southern end of McLaughlin and 1 on 82nd Drive. So the 2 on McLaughlin, this doesn't show up there, but they're on the southern end of McLaughlin, north of Gladstone, and then 1 on 82nd Drive, south of 224. Other time, place, and manner regulations include hours of operation, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Disposal has to be in a secure facility. There must be filtration that confines objectionable odors to the premises, and there can be no mobile vending, home occupations, or other sorts of facilities. Also, the ordinance currently requires that dispensaries be located inside the metro urban growth boundary. This is essentially because of law enforcement concerns. We're better able to police the impacts in areas where we have urban levels of law enforcement than rural areas. We have much more dispersed law enforcement. Changes since the first reading of the ordinance have been relatively minor and technical. We've changed several of the whereas statements, those are called the recitals early on, to talk about the unincorporated area of the county. Apologize for the typo there in that first sentence. We've slightly changed the definition of medical marijuana to conform better to state law. And we've clarified the provision with respect to minors being allowed in the waiting area only when accompanying a parent or a guardian who is a card holder. Really, the next steps after this, assuming the board passes this, will be the OLCC will adopt its regulations on recreational marijuana. The legislature is also addressing Measure 91 on recreational marijuana issues. It would be our recommendation that we appoint a formal task force to address recreational and medical dispensaries together, probably including some clarification of what the enforcement scheme will be. But once we have an idea of what the overall environment and the context is going to be, I think we'll be better able to take the next steps with respect to marijuana regulations. And unless the commission has any questions, that concludes my presentation.
Any questions?
I just want to clarify, Dan, that this does not affect the cities, right?
Absolutely not.
So sales of or outlets for marijuana dispensaries can occur within the cities based on whatever ordinances or languages that they have.
Correct, that's correct, Commissioner. And many of the cities are in the process now of deciding what they are going to do, and there's quite a range right now.
Right, and there's 15, 16 cities in Clackamas County, so, okay, thank you.
Commissioner, anything else? All right. So we're going to open the public hearing and ask if anyone wishes to speak, and I have a list up here. Shirley Morgan and Susie Tracy are up first, and then after them, Randy Rappaport and Todd Fletcher. And please give your address. You don't have to give your whole address, where you live.
Good evening. My name is Susie Tracy. I live in Estacada. I'm the director of Defy Drug-Free Estacada Families and Youth, and it's a coalition dedicated to reducing substance use among youth. And I just want to share a couple things with you as I encourage your stewardship efforts over this process. The FDA approves controlled substances and creates safeguards for their medical use. Once regulated, drug manufacturers market and distribute, doctors prescribe, pharmacies sell, reporting systems are established, and recall systems exist to deal with health hazards. Because medical marijuana was legalized through voter initiative bypassing science, pharmacology, and testing guidelines, these safeguards have been compromised. Medical marijuana is not new to Oregon, originally intended to treat chemo-related nausea and AIDS wasting in patients not responding to traditional medicine. It was legalized by voter initiative in Oregon in 1998. Medicinal properties suggested to exist in marijuana have long been available, with the hallucinogenic effects removed in FDA-approved forms known as Marinol and Sesamet. By eliminating the pleasurable side effects in uncontrolled substances, desired outcomes are controlled and the potential for abuse is reduced. In addition, 2 new marijuana drugs intended to reduce cancer pain, multiple sclerosis symptoms, and the incidence of intractable seizures in children with rare forms of epilepsy are currently being tested. In relation to the land use issue, land is the foundation of Oregon's environment, economy, and quality of life. Stewardship over our land profoundly affects the unique beauty, bounty, and livability of our state's communities. It is appreciated that land conservation, protection of natural resources and wildlife, and controlling urban sprawl create challenges when translating community values into plans and standards. Oregon's land use system and UGBs enable development choices to be intentional rather than driven by private interest and profits. Expansion of urban development in rural areas is a concern because of conflicts between farm and urban activities. Untested economics should not drive long-term resource decisions. Land protection is a policy choice between using resource lands for personal gain versus the preservation of productive lands for the common good and should not afford preferential treatment or special privilege. Common good should include attention to short and long-term community impacts to local culture, traffic patterns, road safety and integrity, wildlife habitat, air quality, crime rates, law enforcement capabilities, environmental contaminants, native vegetation, historical preservation, scenic byways, recreational opportunities, sustainable tourism, branding norms, economics, and overall public health. Thank you for your willingness to bear these responsibilities on our behalf.
Thank you. Shirley?
Well, good evening, Chair Bernard and Commissioner Schrader and Savas. It's nice to see you again. I live in Welch's at P.O. Box 1351, and I am representing the Citizens for Public Safety, Quality of Life, and Property Values, and I will be speaking on behalf of those holding up the red cards in the audience. We have 4 concerns. Number 1, marijuana dispensaries are not legitimate businesses as they are federally illegal and should have been banned. Marijuana is a corrupt legality and has not found its way through the same front door that the rest of the businesses in this county have had to do. The majority of Oregon voters have said no twice to having these facilities in our communities, once with Measure 33 in 2004, and again with Measure 74 in 2010. It was our pro-marijuana legislators who pushed HB 3460 against the will of the majority of Oregon voters. And in a defiant pushback to hold jurisdictional rights, there have been over 200 of the 241 cities and 32 of the 36 counties in the state who have banned these facilities based on federal law. And though 51.9% voted yes for Measure 91 in Clackamas County, that is not a big enough margin to politically gamble with the safety of the rest of us who live here. Number 2, marijuana in smoke form has never been approved as medicine by the FDA, and to lead the general public to think otherwise by allowing these types of facilities to open is a very dangerous protocol. Number 3, in light of these risks, we ask the commissioners not to allow minors to be present anywhere on the premises as it exposes them to public safety dangers, as many of these facilities have had armed robberies and fatal shootings. Number 4, we ask that you continue to uphold that these facilities not be allowed outside the urban growth boundaries. In Denver, Colorado, their police department has seen a 1,000% increase in marijuana seizures since 2011, which reveals the continued challenges that law enforcement faces. Marijuana shops that operate by cash only and are filled with pot make them an obvious, visible, bullseye target for criminal activity. In closing, we cannot ignore these threats to our communities, and on behalf of the Citizens for Public Safety, Quality of Life, and Property Values, we encourage our commissioners to keep these values as your first priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. Randy and Todd.
Oh, no, the ones you said, first name, last name.
I'll go first. Good morning.
Morning, or afternoon.
I was here yesterday speaking a little bit about a dispensary that we were looking to open in Rhododendron, Oregon. And we've been working with the state very closely to make sure that this dispensary is safe. There is a lot of hoops you have to jump through. We're going to be, we have cameras, we have security systems, and we will have a security guard on site. What I would like to tell you is the state has approved us. We're in a very well-traveled area. We picked a site that was away from schools. We picked a site that's kind of not around anything. And the only criteria that we're not meeting right now is that we're outside of the urban growth boundary. We do believe that recreational is coming. We'd like to remain a medical facility. And what we'd like to ask is, it doesn't appear that there's a whole lot of people here that are trying to open up medical dispensaries in Clackamas. We've been here twice, and I think only one other person has come in and said that they were looking to do a dispensary here. So we'd like to see if there would be a possibility of an exception. We have been approved already by the state. We have everything in place, and we're ready to open, and we do intend to open a medical dispensary. So we'd like to know if that is possible today for you guys to decide on.
Well, it may be part of the discussion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Should I give my name, or is that cool?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
That's hi there. My name's Randy Rappaport. Hello, everyone. I am a resident of Rhododendron as well as Portland. I split my time in between both locations. One of the strongest arguments for allowing a medical marijuana dispensary to open in the east portion of the county is safe access. And the other reason is business development. I consider that a secondary of secondary importance, but that area of the county is quite depressed and economically, and we would be offering jobs. We have other development that we'd like to be doing in the town. But the strongest argument is safe access, because there are hundreds of card holders outside of the urban growth boundary within 25 miles of our location. And they've been asking for safe access. And as you heard in testimony at the last round. And so I would ask that you grandfather our licensed facility. Both Todd and I have master's degrees in educational psychology. I'm a trustee of the square at the Pioneer Courthouse Square in Portland. I'm essentially a model citizen in this area, and we're asking that our application be grandfathered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So next up is Elizabeth Russell and Aaron Purchase. And please give your name and address. Thank you.
Chair Bernard, Commissioners, hello. My name is Elizabeth Russell. I live in Portland, Oregon. I work as a coalition coordinator in Oregon City. I work with Oregon City Together, which is a coalition of community leaders and parents and youth dedicated to reducing substance use in Oregon City. I've been participating in the discussion group that's been developing or contributing to the ordinance that you're looking at today. And I want to just thank you for taking a firm position on the buffers around the schools and other family-sensitive areas. That's just such a critical thing. And I want you to know that last week in Oregon City, we hosted a forum on marijuana and youth, a community awareness forum. We had 150 people there. Again, community leaders, parents, youth, and educators, people who really care about what is coming up. There's a lot of unknowns, and there's a lot of need to be informed. And also, inside the city limits, we've got a lot of questions, and I know that's the case for a lot of communities in Clackamas County. So everything that we can do in the unincorporated areas makes such a difference. And I know that those 150 people would probably be thanking you if they were here right now as well. So my main concern that's remaining is the enforcement plan for this for these buffers. I know already we've got one dispensary that's operating illegally in Clackamas County, and I'm a little bit unclear about how we're going to move forward protecting these buffers that are written in, and especially with retail, recreational coming down the line. So I just want to reinforce the encouragement to formally appoint a task force that can support the commissioners in staying informed. There's a lot of moving parts in this, and I think the more attention and broad base of engagement we can have, I think we can contribute quite a bit to an informed and intelligent and comprehensive approach to this in Clackamas County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for having me here today. My name is Erin Purchase. My address is P.O. Box 1127, Oregon City. I am a parent. I am a citizen of Oregon City. I was at that meeting she discussed. I am one person that is not for the strict regulations. I was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease when I was 17 years old. I was diagnosed with chronic liver disease at the age of 24. My daughter was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia in 2012. Her and I both used medical cannabis with great success. I used pharmaceutical drugs up until I became a medical marijuana patient. I replaced 16 medications. Not only that, I was enlightened to a lifestyle that is phenomenal. I now eat a completely organic vegetarian diet. I don't consume a drop of alcohol. I'm a much better citizen now today than I was 4 years ago before I discovered medical marijuana. Not only that, my daughter went through 3 years of intensive chemotherapy without even a single Tylenol. She was able to have a smile on her face every single day. She used no narcotic medication, which to me is very important because she has less of a chance of becoming a heroin addict when she's older. She used medical cannabis oil every single day. I got that at a dispensary. By banning dispensaries, you are banning children, families from purchasing medicine for their children. I represent thousands of children all over this country using medical marijuana. In the state of Oregon, when my daughter was diagnosed in 2012, there were 50 children on the program. Today, there's over 200. There are children that I work with in our community that never were able to go to school because they constantly seize. There's no doctor in the state that was able to help them until they found medical cannabis. Now, this particular little girl that I'm discussing is in school every day for the first time in 6 years, and that's right here in our community. I just want you to understand that this plant is not about crime and horrible behavior. By continuing to ban dispensaries and safe access to patients, you're forcing them to go to the black market, and you're forcing them to do things that are illegal. So I'm just here to say that I, as a citizen of Oregon City and this county, do not support the strict regulations above what the state has already put into place. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
So I just want to clarify, we're not banning dispensaries. We're just putting boundaries around schools and some of those areas. So this actually allows them.
So next up is Jennifer Valley and, wait, didn't I just do that one?
No.
Jennifer Valley and Jeremy Wheeler. Thank you. Please give us your name and address.
My name is Jennifer Valley. I live at 10308 Southeast 96th Avenue in unincorporated Clackamas County. I think it's important to understand that medical marijuana addresses the three primary drivers of healthcare costs. Number one being pain management. approximately 9% of our population across all demographics and socioeconomic demographics qualify for this program and are affected by pain. And I've been approached by a major healthcare organization over the last year, and they would like to mainstream medical marijuana, and they expect to have this available to as many as 2 million clients in this state within the next 5 years. And I just feel that having 90% of the county without safe access will make that kind of implementation really difficult. I really feel that medical marijuana dispensaries were the most significant healthcare reform that we've passed in the last 5 years because they create community-based healthcare that costs less, does more, and creates jobs. They also address end-of-life care, which all men must die, and 80% of our healthcare costs are generated in the last 2 years of life. I just want to make it possible for people to die better because I've had last rites. I've spent literally years bedridden. I know what it's like to face that journey. And if we can make it more comfortable, less painful, we can reduce the costs for everyone and make healthcare affordable for everyone. But in order to do that, we need to have safe access for those patients, and that's going to include delivery services and local access. Their caregiver needs to be able to get the medicine they need in a timely basis. We're just really looking at a huge economic boon as well with the implementation of M91. There's going to be a lot of different businesses happening that are going to create tourism on a national basis. Oregon is still the only state in the nation that allows non-residents to come here, join the medical marijuana program, get their medicine, and go home. And because of that, I'm seeing patients from the Mayo Clinic from across this country. I see patients from Texas, New York, Missouri, and they come here because there's nothing else their doctor can do. I am the last line of treatment. But they need the ability to go to dispensaries. They need this kind of safe access, and we need to be able to promote this on a national basis. There's a city in Texas, all they do is cancer research and treatment, and I want to have the same thing here in Clackamas County. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jeremy?
My name is Jeremy Wheeler. I'm from Lane County. I'm actually a prospective dispensary owner here. I'm looking to open up a dispensary on the north end of McLaughlin Boulevard in your urban growth boundary. The only thing that precludes me from doing that is about 100 foot. Kids would have to physically fly over a 5-lane highway to cross to get in with a 2,000-foot buffer to my proposed location. So again, I'm here to express my concerns over the additional school buffers the county is proposing for medical marijuana dispensaries. I believe making the school buffers more than twice the state and federal limit is sending the wrong message. It unjustly hurts medical marijuana patients, prospective medical marijuana businesses, the potential economic benefits. I believe the current 1,000-foot state buffers are substantial enough as found by this state, Colorado, Washington, and the federal government. I do not believe imposing very restricted buffers over top of any other business, including bars, nightclubs, strip clubs, adult stores, sends the right message. This restricts access for patients and sends a closed-minded and hurtful message. That is not the message the county looking to show an accepting, welcoming environment to foster growth, economic development, and an inviting place for people to stay at, move to, and live their lives to the end want. Even if even if that includes people using a newly illegal but always misunderstood plant for treatment in pain and other various serious ailments. Again, I have a deal on a proposed property on the north end of McLaughlin Boulevard that we brought back to life. It's been a long time vacant property for about 15 years. I'm looking to put about $100,000 in this location, and I don't want to do it with any type of miscommunication. I'm here like a lot of other prospective medical marijuana business people in professional fashion, looking to work with you hand in hand, side by side. I've done this in other communities. I have other clubs in the southern part of the state, and I'm looking to bring a quality access point for medical marijuana patients here. I believe instead of proposing these strict buffers at a 2,000 foot based on whatever reason you guys have come to, it deserves the ability to take the time and look at other buffers. I think 1,000 foot or 1,500 foot, with also the possibility of an exception, maybe imposing a 1,500 to 1,600 foot buffer tonight from school zones to not show normalization and the proliferation through the schools, with maybe the additional Regulation being that to get past the 1,600 foot, you have to cross a 4-lane highway or greater. In that case, obviously, any teacher, principal, or anybody else that let these kids walk from Guiley Elementary School across a 4-lane highway, well, I think we'd have other things to talk about, and the fact that they might cross by my store that they wouldn't have access into anyway. They don't have a card. They're not of age of anybody else. If they are, their parents are in there getting medication for them and helping them as a kid with a very serious condition that the state's allowed. Mr. Savis, you come down and say that you guys aren't banning it, but through your actions, you guys are. By taking these restrictive buffers, you are saying, I'm doing my job, I'm doing this, and we're not banning it. But through your proposed regulations in that map, it shows that's exactly what you want to do by not letting anybody else in that area in this county.
So, question for you. Have you approached Milwaukee about a location?
I have.
So how about Happy Valley?
500 foot into your county.
How about Happy Valley?
I like the location I'm at. It's a big location. It's underserved. It's a building that hasn't been utilized in a long time. It actually is an eyesore on your gateway going into Borland. I'm looking again to put about $100,000 in this building, put a whole new facade on it, dress up the front, and it ain't gonna look like a nasty building it is. I know a lot of people would say, well, it could be something else, but there's been proposals, opportunity for everywhere for years, and nobody's done it. The only people that are going to these vacant buildings are medical marijuana entrepreneurs. I sold commercial real estate for Cushman Wakefield for 5 years. I talked to many commercial real estate brokers here, and they all laugh. They say our economic is a joke until it comes to the fact you go into a spot where a medical marijuana dispensary or a growth location is a viable option, and then you got multiple offers, 5 or 6 on the
You
table.
answered my question, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Mike Mullins and Joe Haverly. Joe? Go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Mike Mullins from unincorporated Clackamas County. Hello again. I'm glad to hear you're working with the vets. We assisted the vets in opening a cannabis farm for returning vets from, in fact, SEAL Team 6 and SEAL Team 4. It's completely owned and operated by them. They're pulling many of their comrades in. As you know, Oregon now allows PTSD as one of the symptoms. It's an amazing place where they can come back and do their re-entry into society. It's really, really been working well. It's owned and operated by them. First of all, I'd like to state that, contrary to popular belief, the state has stated that cannabis is medicine here, so let's get by on that. The rules and setbacks that you have imposed here are absolutely unreasonable and unacceptable. I stated that when I was on the committee, and in fact, it's nothing more than a ban. But we do notice that you're allowing large businesses such as Emmer Industries in doing, multi-million-dollar facilities right here on 224. By the way, my kids grew up around marijuana and the patients, and they're drug-free honor students. So what happens when those students go home to parents who are abusing drugs? The kids watch TV, and sooner or later, kids are going to have to travel past a dispensary sometime. So what are we really accomplishing by putting in a 1,500-foot buffer from a liquor store? As far as economic development goes, Colorado has 16,000 marijuana industry jobs. 10,000 of those are new in 2014 alone. It has generated over $70 million in revenue. Colorado is building new schools. We're closing them. If you want to protect kids, fund schools and after-school activities. Thank you very much. By the way, I have 2 locations I'd like to have open too if you want to start handing out exceptions.
Joe?
In behalf of the Citizens Watch Committee, we do not approve of marijuana dispensaries in Clackamas County. I know it's already been passed that you're going to have marijuana in our county. The state has passed the law, but the federal government has not. Federal law out-trumps state law. Thank God my children are adults 50 and 54. This is a tremendous temptation for young children. I've been in the medical field for over 35 years. I'm a retired nurse. I've seen drug abuse big time, and that a lot of them were marijuana smokers. So protect our children. Take this and be very, very limited in behalf of the children, so it's not easy for anyone to attempt to get this. And they say they can't get it, but the same way they say they can't get beer, they just have someone go in there and get it for them and then bring it back out. And then a young lady was saying that marijuana, they come from other states and take marijuana back. That's against the law to take it back because the other states have not approved it and the government, the federal government hasn't approved it. And they can get in serious trouble when they do that. So I don't encourage anyone to do that. And I would not encourage people to move to Oregon because they can get their marijuana. So you commissioners, you do a good job. You three are outstanding. And be very limited and protect our children and make the buffers like they need to be. We need to protect our children. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's the last card I have, and with that, we'll close the public hearing. Oh, I thought I got that one. Matt? Oh, sorry. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you for giving me some time, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. My name is Matt Wallstatter. I am an OMMP patient, have been since 2006. I am also a grower and a dispensary owner. I'm also a parent of a 5-year-old, and I live in Portland. But as a parent, safety is incredibly important to me. We're here today because medical marijuana and recreational marijuana are a fact. There are 4 states plus District of Columbia that have recreational. There are 23 states plus DC that have medical. There are 10 more, at least 10 more, that have CBD laws that allow some medical marijuana, and Georgia just signed their law today. So this is happening. The states are the laboratories of democracy, and often the way we see federal change is beginning at the state level. There has also been federal movement. Our Congressman Blumenauer and our Senators Wyden and Merkley are all working to address banking and tax issues and to also reschedule cannabis. So we're going to see this change at the federal level as well. It's just a matter of time. So the question is, if marijuana is here and it's a fact of our life, how do we want to handle it? And my answer is we want to handle it in the safest way possible. We know that that means legal shops, legal growers. Last time I was here a couple weeks ago, I mentioned to this commission that there are multiple studies that show that dispensaries actually make neighborhoods safer. One from the University of Denver, one from the Rand Corporation, and there are others as well. They show that when you put a dispensary in a neighborhood, you put security, you put attention, and that those neighborhoods become safer. They've also found in a separate Rand Corporation study that when you take a dispensary out of a neighborhood, it becomes less safe. So the idea that just because a dispensary is associated with marijuana, it creates danger is just patently false. Now, beyond that, we have a question of how we want to distribute cannabis. And so the question is, do you want it done on street corners by people who have to answer to nobody? Or do you want it done in a safe, compliant, state-regulated business? And I think that the answer to me is fairly obvious. Licensed compliant shops are the best way to go. I said the same thing when I was here a couple weeks ago. Drug dealers don't check IDs, and that's true. At our shop, we do check IDs. So I think that when you have someone with a license at stake who's jumped through all the hoops, created the security systems that you need, you're going to have a much safer environment for medical and recreational marijuana both. I would just also like to add, we are looking at opening a dispensary, hopefully in Clackamas County. It's not clear to me from the wording of the statute, but with regard to zoning, we urge you to consider light industrial as well as retail zoning. That would be a compliant use to have a retail space in light industrial. It's done pretty regularly, so I just urge you guys to consider that as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Nicole?
Hi there. My name is Nicole Moore from Kaiser, and I'm actually looking to work with Jeremy at Sweetleaf with opening the dispensary here, and I would be making edibles and whatnot. But I came up here to actually talk about postponing the vote. If you guys could push back on that to the 30th, I think is when your next discussion could or would be, if you didn't possibly vote this evening, since you're not all here. I feel it would be much more appropriate and fair for the rest of us as a community, if we're trying to actually make it fair for everybody here, that you guys all actually have an opinion and not just the three of you. Not that I don't value all yours. Also, let's see here, the school limit, I would like to actually request that we put it at 1,500 feet if possible. It would be fair. It kind of falls in the middle somewhere in there between the state and what you guys are proposing. It would allow for other businesses to open in areas that are not doing so well in your community, and we can bring things back to life, as Jeremy had said as well earlier. I think that is actually it. So,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll close the public hearing and ask for a motion to read the ordinance by title only.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded, moved by Commissioner Schrader, I think it was the other way.
I think moved by
Commissioner Savas and seconded by Commissioner Schrader. I'd ask the clerk to read, take the poll.
Sure. Commissioner Schrader?
Aye.
Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Chair Bernard?
Aye. The motion has been approved, and ask the clerk to read the ordinance by title only.
Okay, this is ordinance number 04-2015, an ordinance amending the Clackamas County Code to add Chapter 8.09, establishing time, place, and manner regulations for medical marijuana dispensaries and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion,
So moved.
Commissioner?
Well, I think we have to read the motion in entirety. You want to read the whole thing?
Yeah, you,
Oh, I move we adopt ordinance number 04-2015, amending the Clackamas County Code to add Chapter 8.09, establishing time, place, and manner regulations for medical marijuana dispensaries and declaring an emergency.
I'll second that.
any further discussion?
Yes. So I just want to say that the people that are going to be working on this are our lawmakers in the state legislature that are actively involved in Measure 91 stuff, which we're hearing on a daily basis, different iterations of that, including perhaps making recreational marijuana available for sale in dispensaries, medical marijuana dispensaries, possibly. So, you know, we're quite uncertain. We're doing, I think staff, Mr. Chandler read earlier or said earlier in his presentation that we can relax these to be compliant with law if necessary, and to make it to conform. The cities will also be doing this, so hopefully by some period of time when the legislature is done making the lawmaking of this, we'll have a better idea as to how to make ours and what our regulations are. It could be that our ordinances might be moot, that state law might preempt us from actually enforcing any of this, so we don't know what the future holds. So that's really, I would be lobbying in the legislature for those of you who are for or against medical marijuana dispensaries, or for the recreational piece as far as the distances or the restrictions, the time, place, and manner. But time, place, and manner was established before we ever got involved in this, and we have our opportunity to impose a moratorium, and at this point, propose the ordinance. So that's all I wanted to say.
Great. Commissioner Schrader?
Well, this is, as far as I'm concerned, I've always felt this was a no-win situation. It pits the federal government against states' rights, which has been a tension in this country since its inception. And I'm finding it fascinating that we're arguing states' rights versus the auspice of the federal government. I don't think that, unfortunately, that's probably a question that we as county commissioners can't directly answer, but I think that is there's a legitimate tension. I prefer to err right now on the side of caution with this. I also think that move ahead with this now, and we'll see what happens in the future, and we would have an opportunity to revisit things. However, I think under the circumstances, this is about the best we can do as thoughtful people who are wrestling, in my mind, with an extremely difficult issue and problem. So,
Well, for me, I think that keeping it within the UGB, urban growth boundary, is important because the number of police or sheriff's officers we have outside the urban growth boundary is minimal at best. And since it's an all-cash business, I have some great concerns about all that cash and marijuana sitting around some building somewhere. Originally, I thought that we would consider looking at that other aspect outside the UGB, but that safe access comment that somebody made in support actually worries me more in the rural areas than it does on McLaughlin Boulevard, where we have city police on both sides and the sheriff in the middle. I know this is gonna be a huge change for us. I mean, it's probably originally we were in a moratorium. We decided to get it done early, and we worked really hard to negotiate something reasonable. But it really scares me, frankly, that Oregon could become a marijuana tourism state. It scares me to death. And in Southern Oregon, there's hundreds of growers in Southern Oregon, and they can grow it outside because it grows well down there. And what worries me in the rural community is that when they start lighting it at night, putting razor wire around it, and fence you can't see through, and they've got people walking around with guns and dogs. All those things really worry me, especially since I just moved to a rural area. So it really worries me. So I plan on supporting this vote tonight, and then we can look at it further as things come along. I'm sure that whatever the state does is the legislature does and OLCC does, will have a huge impact on our decision tonight, and I think we should just wait to see what happens. So are we ready for a vote? Clerk, let me see. Clerk, would you take the poll?
Sure. Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader?
Aye.
Chair Bernard?
Aye. The motion is approved. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. I ask the clerk to read the consent agenda by title.
Okay, the consent agenda. Under Health, Housing, and Human Services, approval of an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Portland for homeless management information system services. Approval of an intergovernmental agreement with Oregon Department of Education Early Learning Division for Clackamas Early Learning Hub services. Approval of Amendment Number 2 to an interagency agreement with Clackamas County Health Center Division Behavioral Health Clinic to provide outpatient mental health services. Approval of Amendment Number 1 to an intergovernmental agreement with Multnomah County Department of Human Services Aging and Disability Division for care transition services. Approval of a renewal to the intergovernmental agreement with the State of Oregon Department of Consumer and Business Services Senior Health Insurance Benefits Assistance. Approval to apply for a grant renewal with the State of Oregon Housing and Community Services Department to administer Community Resources Division funds for a variety of social services programs. Under our Finance Department, approval of Amendment Number 10 to a contract documents with Moss Adams LLP for the annual audit services. Under Elected Officials, approval of previous business meeting minutes, and a request by the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office to enter into an annual operation plan and financial plan with the USDA Forest Services for cooperative law enforcement services in the Mount Hood National Forest. Under the Department of Employee Services, approval of the labor contract between Clackamas County and the Federation of Oregon Parole and Probation Officers. Under County Administration, authorization to submit a letter of intent for Metro Community Planning and Development Grant for the Stafford Area Transportation Study. Under the Development Agency, approval of Amendment Number 1 to the Cooperative improvement agreement with Oregon Department of Transportation for intersection improvements at 82nd Avenue and Monterey Avenue. Approval of a memorandum of understanding with North Clackamas School District Number 12 for design, construction, and assistance with construction funding of 4 improvement projects at the Wichita Center for Family and Community. And one more under the Development Agency, approval of Amendment Number 1 to the contract documents with Harper, Huff, Peterson, Regelis, Inc. for consulting services for engineering design and construction plans for the Monterey Avenue Extension Project. And that concludes the consent agenda.
Do any members of the commission want to remove or pull an item from the consent agenda?
Sure, we can pull it all.
Yeah. It's a lot to pull. So is there a motion?
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
It has been moved by Commissioner Schrader and seconded by Commissioner Savas. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please poll the commission.
Commissioner Schrader?
Aye.
Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Chair Bernard?
Aye. With that, we'll move on to the county administrator update. And Nancy Newton, the assistant county administrator, do you have anything to update for us tonight?
I have a couple of small items. Very quickly, the Department of Health, Housing, and Human Services is gearing up to kick off its annual June food drive. Last year, the department raised the equivalent of a food of nearly 12,800 pounds. And we're hoping to surpass that this year. And it's important to note that they do this in June. Most people think about giving food to the homeless or the hungry around the holiday time, so they need food continually throughout the year. So this is a great effort that they do every year. Additionally, the River Health Community Watershed Stewardship Program grant program is now in full swing. This program awards funds to support community groups and citizens and their partners who want to improve the health of Clackamas County Service District Number 1 and the watersheds within that service district. The River Health Stewardship Program proposals are being accepted until May 18th. And if you would like to clean up your watershed, if you're in the district, you can find out more about this program by visiting riverhealth.org. And that's the conclusion of my report. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Communication, Mr. Savas, would you like to start?
Sure, I'll start. Excuse my voice. I'm kind of getting over a sore throat and a cough. I got some revised numbers on the Eagles Landing project based on different phases of the completion, which were approved by the assessor. So these are kind of somewhat hot off the press, but very similar to the most recent numbers we saw. And regards to the, I guess I'm going to talk about, there's two parts of this. One's the transportation SDCs, which I will not talk about tonight, but I will talk about what I have before me tonight, and that is relates to the $2.4 million apartments that are being sold and transferred. So $2.4 million would, if that got sold, if the development agency sold that, that would generate about $360,000 to the county, and the remainder of that would go towards the other taxing districts: schools, fire, law enforcement, vector control, all the different districts. But our share of the $2.4 million to the county would be about $365,000. One time, obviously. We sell it once, and that's it. If the developer meets the $560,000 minimum, just the minimum, meets the requirements for return of the $2.4 million, then we will be generating to the county every year $331,000 every year in each year following, and a total of $2.2 million, over almost $2.3 million, to all the taxing districts, with $1 million alone going to schools and education, the college, North Clackamas School District, just every year, year after year after year. So the numbers are actually better than we originally anticipated. And again, I was under the understanding that the developer submitted the master plan yesterday. So we'll see where it goes. And when the property is sold, well, the money will be in escrow and be held until the project is completed.
Great, that's it.
That's what I have today.
Great, Commissioner Schrader.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Commissioner Savas, for clarifying that, because there has been a lot of misinformation out there, and I think it's very important that people understand that when we make these significant decisions, they're done thoughtfully, they're done with numbers, they're done with facts, and they're done in a way to make sure that the public is protected and that we're using their tax dollars wisely. So thank you for bringing that up. I would just like to briefly mention the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. This week we had Senator Wyden's chief of staff, actually chief legislative person out, and also members of the federal government from various agencies, the USDA, the Small Business Association, EPA. Am I missing any, Nancy? Probably a few off the top of my head. That's what comes to mind. And we talked with the agencies to see how they can help us leverage the dollars that they could potentially bring to this project, which we are hopeful is truly going to be a legacy project. It will be the first time in 100 years that the river is actually opened to the public. We are also continuing to work with our economic development partners, with the county, as well as with Oregon City, to see what kinds of businesses and jobs we hope can be cited there. So I believe it's going to be a wonderful project. The Riverwalk, the easement has been signed by the person who agreed to an easement by the person who owns the property. And so we are moving ahead with it. And we're not only generating statewide interest in this, we are also generating federal interest in this as it truly being a legacy project. The other piece of this is I did help organize and chair a meeting that had to do with the locks project, which is, reopen the Willamette Falls locks. We do have a task force that continues to work on that issue, and we continue to knock on the door of the Corps of Engineers, who seem to be the ones that hold the keys to victory in that one. But we're looking at using that, as we hope, as a national. It is already a national historic register property. The locks is already on the National Register of Historic Places. The whole area, the locks, as well as the Willamette Falls area on the Oregon City side, has been in the process now of finalizing the designation as a state heritage site. And eventually, as we move forward with the Legacy Project and the locks, we hope that we can be the first national heritage site on the West Coast, which obviously we believe will help generate considerable opportunities for tourism in this area. So that's been my week so far, and it's only getting better. So
Great, thanks. I'll start off with announcements. And next week, Tuesday, April 21st, the Board of County Commissioners will hold its first town hall meeting at Athey Creek Middle School in the Stafford area. The theme of the town hall is Growing a Vibrant Economy, and that will be a focus of the first half of the meeting. So anyone who would like to ask questions about the county's economy, please come and share it with us. The second half of the town hall will be time devoted to other questions or concerns that people have. Again, that's going to be Tuesday, April 21st at 6:30 at Athey Creek Middle School. The address is 2900 Southwest Borland Road in Tualatin. That was it, right, Mary, for announcements?
That's it.
Okay, so this week for me, I went to AOC. I'm the co-chair of the Public Safety Committee, and OLCC was there, and so was some legislators talk about what's happening with the marijuana, recreational marijuana, and it sounded to me like both of them were waiting for the other one to do what they were supposed to do. So it seemed rather confusing. I talked to some people who heard totally different. AOC Rob Bovett has been really involved in the marijuana issue in Oregon. He's AOC's one of AOC's legal folks, and it was very interesting. I have no idea. My wife was at an event where they had marijuana tourism. They couldn't get the people in the room. It's so huge. So there's the people are just waiting frankly, it scares me to death. And you're right. If people are getting on a plane with marijuana, I think that's illegal, and they shouldn't be doing that. I also went to Salem to testify on the 911 tax increase, which has not been increased. That's on your cell phone. One of the problems with the technology these days is if you call on your cell phone, we can't find you. But if you call from a landline, we can. So there's a big problem with that. Except I waited 3 hours, and they moved the meeting to next week. So it was a wasted drive. But, you know, there's a lot going on in Salem. Clackamas County has some land use laws, some, like Commissioner Savas mentions, we have a lack of industrial land, and we need to find a solution for that. Stafford area, which has been in a purgatory lawsuits trying to resolve the Stafford area, and Wilsonville has an opportunity to bring in some industrial land and some housing, and they're held up because the urban-rural decision has not been made. So I hope those folks in Salem get their work done so we can get back to the table and try to resolve some of the concerns in the Stafford area. So with that, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.